By the spring of 1945, Nazi Germany was dying. What remained of Hitler's once feared armored divisions were shadows, short on fuel, ammunition, and hope. Among them stood the 11th Panzer Division, once called the Ghost Division for its speed and battlefield cunning. Now the ghosts were real. Formed in 1941, the 11th Panzer Division had carved a deadly path across the Eastern Front and later fought fiercely in France. Hardened veterans, skilled tank crews, this was no broken unit. But by April 1945, reality had changed. The Allies were pushing from the west. The Red Army was closing in from the east. Germany was being crushed between steel jaws. Orders from Berlin still demanded resistance to the last man. The men of the 11th Panzer knew better. Retreating through southern Germany, the division faced an impossible choice: fight on in meaningless battles or find a way to survive what was clearly the end. What followed was extraordinary. Rather than waste lives in hopeless combat, senior officers of the division quietly began doing something almost unthinkable in the Third Reich. They prepared to surrender on their own terms. The goal was simple: avoid the Soviets. Captured by the Red Army often meant imprisonment, or worse. The 11th Panzer Division instead maneuvered westward, deliberately slipping past enemy forces and avoiding major engagements. Tanks were abandoned, heavy weapons destroyed, fuel burned off rather than used. The Ghost Division was fading itself out. All the while, discipline remained intact. There was no mass desertion, no collapse into chaos. Columns moved deliberately, flags concealed, radios kept silent. By early May 1945, the division reached areas controlled by U.S. forces. Then came the final act. In a move of quiet defiance against Nazi fanaticism, the division's commanders ignored any remaining orders from Berlin. There would be no last stand, no pointless deaths. Instead, the men stacked their weapons. White flags were raised. Thousands of German soldiers, once elite armored troops, surrendered almost intact to the Americans. For many Allied soldiers, it was surreal. One of Germany's most effective panzer divisions had effectively chosen when, where, and how to end the war for itself. The surrender was orderly. The division ceased to exist, not in flames but in silence. The war in Europe ended days later. The 11th Panzer Division did not fall in a dramatic final battle. It did something rarer in the history of war. It recognized the moment when fighting no longer had meaning. Giving up the ghost was not cowardice. It was survival. And in the final days of a collapsing empire, the Ghost Division vanished, leaving behind a lesson that even the fiercest armies must eventually face reality.